Chicago police have just released dispatch sound from the night Laquan McDonald was shot to death by a police officer. In it, you will hear the dispatch officer call for someone with a taser to respond. Then you will hear the moment the dispatch officer learns that shots were fired.
And again, I'm holding here until I get help with 815 Robert, asking for a taser for armed defender with a knife. Anybody close? 40, they're more by car.
45 Robert, we're about 2 blocks away.
Let me know when he's in custody, guys.
Fired by the police.
It's shot
Fired by the police squad. Doors over here.
As you know, McDonald died, his death sparking outrage citywide. In just hours, protesters are planning to rally on Chicago's Magnificent Mile. Many of them are calling for Mayor Rahm Emanuel to step down. Residents angered by the way city officials have handled McDonald's case and others. Major protests in the Minneapolis area last night. Black Lives Matter activists taking their message inside the country's largest shopping center. Police in riot gear lining the halls of the Mall of America as protesters entered, ultimately dispersing the crowd and pushing the protesters outside the mall. 5 people were taken into custody. But the protest at the mall turned out to be a decoy action meant to distract police from paying full attention to the Minneapolis airport and the light rail station. The tactic worked. Protesters forced TSA agents to shut down 2 security checkpoints at the Minneapolis airport. 8 more arrested here. Some flights were delayed by hours. Black Lives Matter organizer Asha Long is with me now. She was at the airport protest last night. Welcome.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Thank you for being with me. Asha, Pastor Danny Givens from your movement told the Minneapolis Star, quote, "We raised the bar. We let the nation and the world know that Black Lives Matter." Still, the nation is on a heightened terror alert. People are anxious. Your protest made them more anxious. So how does that help your cause?
Well, our action yesterday was a means toward a number of things, including justice for Jamar Clark, which we have been working on for over 6 weeks. It's important that we disrupt business as usual to highlight the fact that Black lives are in a state of emergency and that we are being murdered and prosecuted at astronomical rates.
I think that many people are sympathetic to your cause, but still the governor was pleading with you not to mess with the airport, yet protesters did. Again, how do people who missed their flight home for Christmas be sympathetic to the cause?
I think it's important that we realize people who are upset about missing their flight, that many Black lives are disrupted every day. Every day, the Black community is dealing with over-policing, constant police harassment. Black students are being suspended at astronomical rates. Black folks are unable to live their lives autonomously, and it's important that we focus on what's important, focus on getting justice and fixing the disparities in the Black community.
But what would you say, Asha, to people who say what's important right now is Americans remain safe at a very sensitive time in our nation when people are flying home for Christmas, right? And the nation's on a heightened terror alert, yet protesters force TSA agents to take their eye off the ball to handle protesters.
Safety for Black lives is an illusion. Especially at the airport. The airport is actually under investigation for the practices that they're doing. As you know, and as you've reported, Islamophobia is rampant, especially in the airport. So many people are taken off their flights and harassed, and it's important.
There's no evidence that I'm sure it goes on, but there's no evidence that many people are taken off their flights and harassed.
I think there is. I mean, you can see it when
give me
a
stats.
person of color. What was that?
Give me stats.
I don't have statistics for you. I don't have statistics. What I do have is experience as a Black person. I see my Muslim counterparts being harassed on the daily, whether they're at the airport or not. Black lives in general are harassed every day. I do not have statistics, but I do have lived experience, which is just as valid.
I understand that, but I just want to ask you one more time. At a time when our nation is on heightened alert, is it really the best idea to disrupt things at the nation's airports?
Yes, I do think it's a good idea. People that are going to the airport are trying to get home for Christmas, especially during this time. And it's important to note that Jamar Clark will not have a Christmas. There will be a place setting that will not be used for Jamar Clark. So we can't just go on living our lives when Black lives are in a state of emergency, when Black lives are actually being harassed with terrorism. We can call terrorism on the police department. We can call terrorism, and we have to call out the terroristic tactics of the police at the airport.
All right, I have to leave it there. Asha Long, thank you so much for being with me. Still to come in the newsroom, the new film.
Several Black Lives Matter protesters are facing charges this morning in Minneapolis. Now, they were arrested during demonstrations that began at the Mall of America and then moved to the Minneapolis-St. Paul airport. The protesters were determined to be there over the objection of the mall's owner. Al Jazeera's Andy Rostian has more.
This is one of the busiest shopping days of the year and the single busiest flying day of the year. And as it turned out, there were 12 arrests, both at the mall and the airport. By the time Black Lives Matter protesters blocked the entrance to the Minneapolis airport and started chanting and crowding into two terminals, police had had enough and shooed them out.
I order all those assembled at Terminal 2 Humphrey to immediately disperse.
Earlier, the protests at the Mall of America had barely begun when police moved in to shut it down. Signs went up warning that no protests were allowed. A section of the mall, housing a quarter of its more than 520 stores, went into lockdown. Some protesters stayed to mock police, but others headed out and packed onto trains.
For what reason? Everybody who's with Me Alive, we are headed towards the light rail.
Heading to the airport. Police followed, and it was there that handcuffs came out. Black Lives Matter organized the demonstration to call attention to the November 15th police shooting of Jamar Clark, who died one day later. The Mall of America had threatened the group with a lawsuit, and a judge's ruling ordered 3 of its leaders banned altogether.
Do you think that the lawsuit had something to do with sort of the lack of organization?
Absolutely, because I know that, for example, some of the real organizers that were doing this year as well as last year were threatened, basically told that at least 3 of them said that they were not able to come in here.
The manager at this store, who we saw closing up shop, said he would lose about $6,000 today. He was one of many who told us Black Lives Matter was turning off more people than it attracted.
It ain't just Black lives, all lives matter, but you don't go somewhere and you mess up everybody's flow, because if something happens to somebody and their family at a distance because, well, they couldn't get somewhere or they couldn't go somewhere, then what you gonna say, I'm sorry?
But one protester pointed to the way other movements, civil rights, women's rights, gay rights, made people uncomfortable.
But all movements have been blamed, and all movements have been accused of turning the mainstream messages off.
And at the very least, the protests remained peaceful. The mall has long said that it doesn't take a position on Black Lives Matter, but it said today that the courts have always affirmed that this is private property and that they had every right to kick any protesters off.
Andy Rostian in Minnesota. Later today, protests are planned on Chicago's Michigan Avenue. Black Lives Matter demonstrators will call on the mayor, Rahm Emanuel, to step down over several police-involved shootings there.
I'm the leading state sponsor of terrorism.